Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Hands on SAP Dev with Q Macro. That's me, DJ. Episode 68 with a special guest who is there on my, whatever the left or right is in my terminology or your terminology, over there. Witalij. Welcome, Witalij. I don't want to leave you sitting there while I do the announcement. So I thought we've got this plan. We had this plan. Witalij and I had this plan about, I'm going to say this, then I'm going to introduce him, but I've completely messed that plan up now and decided to introduce him anyway. So welcome, Witalij.
Thank you, DJ.
Yes, I did think it would be a bit weird for me to sort of start talking like I normally do, and then you're just sitting there thinking, what do I do? Do I, spin some plates or play a card trick or something? So welcome to the channel. This is your first time on the channel, right?
Yes, and I'm really glad to be here today.
Well, thank you very much. It's great to have you. So, we'll talk about what you're going to cover shortly. So, welcome, first of all, folks on the stream. Welcome, Tim, to a sunny Chorlton. It's sunny over here in Failsworth as well. And Rahul, good noon. Good noon to you, Rahul. Very nice to see you. Very nice to see everybody. So, there we go. So, today's episode 68 is going to be a continuation of what Witalij was doing last time he was on a live stream with Max in Max's Adventures in Cloud Platform episode 8. But I've got 2 or 3 things to sort of talk about briefly first. First of all, we had the recap conference on Friday, which was awesome. Brilliant speakers, brilliant organization by Volker and team. And I've just received from Volker some awesome recap stickers. I've only got a few, but I will be giving away a couple of these stickers on Friday's Hands on SAP Dev live stream, of course, Friday, May 22nd, usual time, usual place, as normal. So I'll give a couple of those away. I'm not sure how I'm going to decide yet, but we'll do it randomly maybe. Chesh, good day to you, sir. And Greg, not so. Gregory, hello, Dynamic Duo. Hello to you, sir, Dynamic there's the recap stickers. I'll talk more about those on Friday. One really simple thing is that I'm trying to maintain a calendar, a Google Calendar. It's linked in the Hands on SAP Dev main blog post. And a calendar is basically a Google Calendar with the upcoming live streams that I do. It's been the Code at Home ones, but most importantly, the Hands on SAP Dev ones. And I've also got, when I see them, I know they're upcoming. I've got the ones from Tom Young and the ones from Max and the ones from Kevin, for example. So I'm going to put a link in the chat there. There's a link to this sort of agenda view of the calendar, and I found it quite useful, and I've had a couple of bits of feedback as well that say that they found it quite useful. So I'm going to try and maintain that. Let me know in the chat either today or Friday whether that's a useful thing or not. Vincent, good afternoon. Yes, well, you've got to set your alarm for Friday, your day off on Friday. So do I, though, because it's a day off for me as well, but I'm still going to do a live stream, because why not? Because Hands on SAP Dev, right? So the final thing I want to announce is, or remind us all of, is, of course, that at the end of this month, basically it's, next weekend, there is SAP Online Track. So I've just posted a link to the blog post all about that, the blog post from Jakob. It's got links to all different places, all sorts of different things, like the actual YouTube channel itself and so on, so I don't need to share anything else. So check out SAP Online Track, end of May. It's going to be awesome. I'm looking forward to participating in that, and I think a little bird tells me that Mr. Witalij is participating as well. So it's a good chance or a good time for me to sort of properly introduce Witalij. Tell us a bit about yourself for people who have not seen you before on my channel and everything, and what you're going to talk about, and then I'll switch scenes and you can take it away.
Okay, then as you mentioned already a couple of times, my name is Witalij. And one thing you didn't mention, but probably worth mentioning, is that we are teammates. So basically, we are both developer advocates in SAP Developer Relations. The third thing to kind of like introduce myself, I put this shirt, so I don't need to explain for too much who I am, right? So I was data geek way before it became cool. And because we are talking about cap. So I'm wearing this cap, and because I'm talking primarily, or I started from talking about HANA at cap. That's why, this cap has SAP HANA logo.
Nice. Nicely done.
And I am based in beautiful city of Wrocław in Poland. And I will be joining as well SAP online track with one of my sessions. So I don't know if people already see the screen. If you can share mine.
Yeah, I'm just sending, just switching the scene now. So folks on the stream, let me know as soon as you see Vitalij's screen. And hi to Pramod and hi to Phil. Great stuff. There we go. So yeah, I can see your screen. I think the folks should be seeing it shortly. So there we go.
Right. So we've got lots of really great sessions here, and I'm extremely proud about all the sessions that are related to analytics and HANA topics. Actually, most of the people, probably except Tammy, who are presenting here, were people to whom I personally reached out and pinged them and asked, guys, we cannot miss this opportunity to talk about the topic that we are all so passionate about. And I will be one of the presenters talking about data visualization and being a data analyst, right? So in my previous streaming sessions with Maxi, I was primarily focusing on some kind of like data scientist even in this last episode when we started exploring Jupyter and how Jupyter can connect to HANA using HANA ML Python library. And then the one that I will be talking about during this SAP Online track is data analyst. And the person I wanted to focus on today is primarily data engineer. But basically, we just keep exploring different stuff, and there will be a little bit of HANA, a little bit of HDI, a little bit of SAP Cloud Platform,
nice.
And SAP Data Intelligence, right? So disclaimer applies that basically this session is, once again, it's not SAP education, it's not SAP consulting, it's not a workshop. We just explore things, right? Yeah. Not everything that we are doing is best practice, but it is meant to sometimes even go through trial and error just to understand things, to understand Absolutely. How they work.
That's what this channel is all about, hands-on SAP Dev, right?
Right. Okay. And frankly speaking, it took me quite a while to decide to join these streaming shows that you were running and then Maxi were running, because you are talking about, developers, development. And one thing that I felt we are constantly missing is to somewhat extend the meaning of this developer, right? Because basically the guys who you are talking about are mostly what we call app devs.
App devs.
Right. And they are mostly building like business transaction applications, and these business transaction applications are usually, UI, logic, or some services, and some data persistency, right? And I mentioned as well about this in my previous discussion with Mr. Maxi, that quite often when I talk even to people from our team, I'm hearing just like, oh, this data block is just a storage for me, right? Yeah. I just put data there and I just grab data from there, and that's all I need, right? And I absolutely understand kind of like your point of view. And one thing that was kind of like challenging, frankly speaking, for me is when I decided that I wanted to join kind of like your show and Maxi's show, is as well to wear this business application developer or enterprise application developer hat as well. And frankly speaking, this is where lots of this stuff, with CAP, with OData, with HDI containers for this data deployment. It was all new, believe me or not. I know that many people, like there is a group of developers in our ecosystem who constantly talk about this and they think it's all obvious. But again, believe me or not, there is this other huge community out there who I would call analytic application developers.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And many people just used to think, oh, these guys, they are not developers, because they have just some BI tools, they connect to some data, and it's all like, point and click and set this table, put these colors, and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
The things changed to big extent, I would say, since then. Because today, once we are talking with these 3 V's of data, which is variety, volume, and velocity of data, it means that most of the time, we can build really simple visualizations, data analytics, just using the scanned reports and so on. But if you really want to deliver an insightful data analytics application to your business,
Mm-hmm.
you need to put lots of code here as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Custom logic, or the equivalent maybe of custom logic, would you say? Or
it's not even custom logic, right? Custom logic is something that you would think happening, kind of like in this area, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kind of like equivalent of your services.
Mm-hmm.
This is your custom visualization. And just to give you an example, for example, Michal Korzeń here from Poland, who was once appointed as one of our developer heroes and who is known as HANA Wizard by lots of the customers here in Poland.
Yep.
For example, once created an application for one of the banks, biggest banks here in Poland, where the guys wanted to use SAP BI tool, but to see the heat map of their mobile application and where people are clicking on this, right? So you can imagine, right? You have a mobile application and then you basically click this, right? So he used this BI tool just as a shell, right? But the whole visualization he had to create himself using JavaScript, kind of like from the ground up, right?
Wow.
So this is what we called analytic applications. And then there is another area of this so-called data intensive applications. And this is what we are going to focus on today, right? So this BI application is something that I want to explain a little bit more once we will be talking about the things during online track. But data intensive applications are primarily, when we are dealing with different forms of data and we are what we call pipelining, right? This is what you would call like services or manipulating or putting business logic in this, right? When we are pipelining this data one way and another. And in this case, in most of the cases, we don't have really kind of like UI where you need to develop, because in this case, most of this UI is just simple dashboard. Okay, maybe not that simple, but dashboards which are showing, how this data is being moved through your enterprise landscape, how this data have been assessed for the quality, where issues are happening, right? How you orchestration of this data is working. And in this case as well, this is where we used to think that this is kind of like not development as well, because this is everything that you would do with ETL tools, right? You just go into ETL tool, and again, you have all the possible transformation predefined, and then you just grab data from one side, do transformation, put data into the other side, right? Not much of the work done. But again, because of these 3 V's, velocity, variety, and volume of data, these ETL tools, they still have their role primarily once you are moving data from relational application, for example, ERP, into a relational data warehouse like BW. Yeah. But then for lots of other different implementations of these data intensive applications, you need to build pretty much all these pipelines yourself. Okay. So, sorry, I know that you want to see primarily code and so on, but I hope that this kind of short introduction, and visualization would help.
Well, yeah, no, that puts it into context, right? What we're going to be doing.
Okay, so as I mentioned, we are going to talk primarily about this data engineer persona today. And for that, we are going to look at something that is as fresh as you can imagine. And this is the trial of SAP Data Intelligence 3.0. So for that, I will log on into what we call SAP Analytics. You see I'm screwed with analytics, yeah? SAP Cloud Application Library. And if I look for data intelligence,
Well, while you're looking for that, this just in case people are not aware of what this is, this CAL, this Cloud Application Library, this is a myriad of pre-built solutions that you can sort of instantiate and run in the cloud. Really, really useful.
Right. So this is kind of like a catalog of predefined templates for different applications. Some of them are developer edition, some of them are trial edition, some of them are actually even productive applications that business can, start really quickly. But all of them are being deployed to some cloud vendor, right?
Yeah.
So if you see my screen, then right now we are looking at this SAP Data Intelligence Trial Edition 3.0. And as I mentioned, it has been released on May 14th, right? So basically, this is fresh thing from Friday. And if anyone wants to kind of like learn a little bit more, then there is a blog that product manager responsible for this trial edition put on Friday as well,
Nice.
right? People can have a look at this. But in my case, I already started this because this data intelligence is quite a beast, let's be frank. And this beast is Kubernetes based. So it takes between 1.5 to 4 hours, depending on the region and cloud vendor, just to start this. And because this is Kubernetes based, basically most of this time to start this up is to download all the containers, all the Docker images from SAP registry to your own registry in your in your cloud.
In your cloud, yeah.
Account, right? So because I'm on DJ Yo show, so obviously I need to do some terminal as well.
Of course, that is one of the requirements.
Yes, and I hope that I am connected. So first thing first, AWS and configure list. Okay, I need to switch my profile. AWS profile. One thing I need to mention is just because Data Intelligence 3.0 used to be known under the name Data Hub in all the 2.0 versions when we are talking about the on-premise. So you will still see this Data Hub here and there from time to time, right? So AWS, Elastic, Kubernetes Service, list clusters.
So basically, you've got a Kubernetes cluster or one or more on your AWS account, right? That's what you're...
So this Kubernetes cluster is created by Cal.
And you've pointed Cal to the AWS account that you wanted to use.
So now I just pointed that AWS to this specific cluster.
Yep.
So I have this cluster visible, and then for kubectl get
Oh, somebody's at the door.
Get clusters, and if I look at my context, so I should be connected already to this cluster, right? So to see, okay, I am connected already, right? Meaning that now if I want to check what's going on, I just need to check the namespaces.
Okay.
And in this case, as I mentioned, you still can see
the Data Hub again. Yeah.
Data Hub somewhere, and pods in the namespace Data Hub. Okay, so you see that there is a whole bunch of pods, which are basically, one layer above kind of like individual containers. Once we are talking about the orchestration using Kubernetes, so everything is running. And now, again, I could do this somewhat simpler way. But again, because I'm on your show, obviously I need to do it hard way from terminal.
Oh.
So
it's a good job. I love you, Witalij.
So the ingress is basically the entry point, right, into your Kubernetes
Yes.
cluster. And this is something that we could just simply get by clicking connect here.
You've been waiting to do that all day, haven't you?
Now, because this is, kind of like trial system, so it has self-signed certificate.
Yeah.
And
the usual thing.
there is a concept of tenants in data intelligence, basically where you are collecting what you the way you group, let's say, particular applications and particular users. And in my case, I'm logging into a system. And if people like Maxi, for example, they don't like to look into all this output, then something that he explained in one of his previous shows, he can just simply look into Grafana and he should feel at home, right? So now the other thing is that if we look into the system management, you can see that right now in our cluster, we have two tenants. One is system, another one is default. And let's say I want just to create the tenant for our today streaming, right? So,
and while you choose a name for that, there's a couple of questions, a bit of a conversation in the chat, which I just seen between Rahul and Greg and Chesh. But I think you might have sort of alluded to the answer to the first question. How is this different to SAP Data Hub? As far as I understand from what you've just said, that actually it used to be called SAP Data Hub in the 2.0 series, and now it's called Data Intelligence.
Yes, sorry about that. Our marketing does everything to deserve their salaries.
Isn't it one of the two hard things in computer science? Is it naming things, cache invalidation, and off by one errors?
Yeah. So now as well, I'm creating, my own user in there. And whenever you feel like, there is quite some time that it takes to respond from the system, it's just because you can see that behind the scene right now, there is a new pod being created with a new container. This is, really containerized application, right?
Yep.
And I just need to add this developer role, right? We are developers in data intelligence. And now I should be good to just sign out and now to go to our stream as itself. And now you should see that again, the new application will be created, the new pod for this specific application, for this specific user is being created. Right? All of that, while it is creating, could be done as well from the command line for people who like it this way. And recently I published as well a blog, actually, as well, last Friday, that if you want to give access to this data intelligence trial to more people in your organization, obviously you don't want to go through all these screens and, just keep clicking there. There is a VCTL CLI application. You just download it.
Nice.
And then, I showed how to do it step by step, plus some very simple script to create.
This is a recent post as well. That was also end of last week, was it?
Yes.
Thursday, Friday last week, yeah.
Yes. Yep. Okay. So again, while this stuff is starting, let me go back here and just look once again on our sorry. Oh gosh, HANA trial. Maybe I should just You should hurry slowly. I don't know if there is equivalent of this saying in English as well. This is what we used to say in Poland.
I think maybe the equivalent is more haste, less speed.
Okay, never heard that, but this is what we are doing here, right? We are learning. So the place where we started from last time is basically, I mentioned it was a learning curve for me as well, right? So we started from this bookshop, and this is where for the very first time I needed to go through, this tutorial, how to build this stuff, how to configure it. And this is my, bookshop that is running,
Yep.
right? And it is using OData. So let me just quickly switch back here. Indeed. So one thing we have in our landscape right now is application. Okay, we are looking at services, right? And this is this bookshop, right? And this is the application. And now, sorry, let me just go back here. And now let me just switch to something that is called connection manager, right? So once you're a data engineer, first thing first, you need to understand what is in your landscape. And again, maybe I should start it earlier, because as you can expect, now it is again building the pod that is going to serve this separate application, which is called connection manager.
Yeah.
Right. So while this connection manager is starting, this is what we call the data governance, right? So data governance is once you have an insight into the whole enterprise data landscape that you have, right? So for example, this is the application. The other element, for example, will be HANA, right? And we want to see all of that. So right now we have nothing in our landscape, and we need to build this, right? So there are some predefined things and connection types, and one of them is OData.
Our friend OData, and our friend Bookshop, as Rahul nicely pointed out. Yes, exactly.
Bookshop, OData, and it was books, if I remember, or browse. I don't know.
Browse was the service name, wasn't it? Or
right.
That service name.
I checked it already earlier that this is V4. In our case, I haven't secured this application, right? So nothing in there. Let me test the connection, and if I did everything right this time, then it should the connection should be successful. While it is starting, let me start as well some stuff that we don't want to waste time later on.
That's okay. This is real life. It's cool. It's all good. It gives us the opportunity to sort of to stare at things and let things sink in. If you're as slow as me with my brain, I need time to sort of think about this stuff.
Okay, so and this is funny thing that I found as well, right? The very first time you start this, obviously, on one hand, we are creating, this Docker container that will serve this. On the other hand, this application already has a timeout.
Okay. So the first time when we did it just then, it was spinning up an actual container in order to make to hold that connection. Okay. Well, yeah, it makes sort of sense.
So this might be. I hope that product management is watching this as well, and this is some kind of. I asked them to join. I don't know if they joined or not.
Welcome if you are. Yeah, welcome.
But basically, now we see that this connection is successful, right? Yes. And now, if I just go to the other application that is called Metadata Explorer, this is the place where, as a data engineer, as a data governor, you will build the complete view in your distributed enterprise landscape, right? Because one thing that I need to explain again and again to some people in our SAP ecosystem is that things changed drastically where it was like this 10, 15 years ago, right? So when I was BW consultant or BI consultant at that time, what we were trying to build were huge enterprise data warehouses, right? So you had all the satellite systems like ERP, CRM, SRM. You might have some third-party providers of some data that you would be buying, for example, from AC Nielsen. But then you tried to put all of this into this huge, monstrous enterprise data warehouse. And at the moment when I was still with Hewlett Packard, for example, our central data warehouse was already 1 petabyte at that time, right? Now the way of thinking has changed, and now you don't move data just because you can, right? And actually the reason why usually you don't move the data is because you cannot, right? With the volume, velocity, and variety, right? So this is where now you look into your data and you analyze everything from one central place, right? So, for example, for books, you can see that you have this and this kind of data.
I mean, I'm assuming that it's the EDMX, the dollar metadata from the OData service that's been analyzed here to produce this stuff, right? That's what the Explorer does.
Right. I mean, you basically, building the catalog of the data that you have in your all applications and your all data sources that build your enterprise data landscape. And here it fails. And I kind of frankly speaking, I tried this for the very first time today. As I mentioned, I'm learning OData starting from today.
Ooh.
So I didn't manage to dig why it is happening, but let's keep it, for some maybe other.
Yeah, that's an exciting HTTP status code as well. 406, not acceptable. We don't see those very often.
Yes. So again, if someone on this, on this show just would like to explore and would like to understand this, I will be more than grateful as well. And let me just move back here, right? So one more thing that I'm hearing quite often is that some people, put their application data into this black box for them, HDI container, and then this HDI container exposing this OData. And I've heard this multiple times as well, just okay, as a data person now doing analytics, doing machine learning, whatever, I would like to get access to your data of your applications. And people are saying, oh, yeah, let me expose OData API for you. Oh, gosh. OData API is not an API for massive data analysis and massive data movements, right? This is usually the API where you are connecting your application UI.
Yeah, it's a CRUD API, isn't it? It's not a mass data transit API.
Keyword that you mentioned. Actually, I was having this in mind as well, that if we just go back to these guys here, the way of thinking here is exactly this CRUD, create, read, update, delete. And usually it is related either to single transaction, single record, single unit of work, or maybe
a query, but
maybe a query that selects some data and so on, right? While if we are in this space of data intensive applications, we are not thinking in this, let's say, single transactions, right? For us, for example, create, we are talking about storage, right? And we need to think about all the possible ways to store graph data, geospatial data, relational data, semi-structured data, and so on and so forth. If we are talking about read, we need to create. So one is the storage. The other keyword that we are using, let's say, in our world is ingestion.
Yes.
Right? So ingestion is this massive pipeline through which you can load data in batch, you can load data in mini batches, you can load data in streaming mode, right?
Yep.
And then we need to read this data, right? So OData is not the right API for that. And then I checked in documentation for HDI containers for HANA 2.0, and it says there are two other web-based APIs to do this. One is called XMLA. So this is XML for analytics. And to query this data, you need to use MDX language, which is multi-dimensional query language. And this is the language that kind of like was popularized by the OLAP analytics of corporate data warehousing. The other interface that is available from HDI is so-called INA, Information Access. And this is the web-based API that is being used by BI tools like, for example, SAP Analytics Cloud or Analysis Office, SAP Analysis Office.
Yes. In fact, I remember some architecture diagrams a long time ago before I joined SAP when we were doing consulting in the Fiori space, and the Fiori front end and the launch pad had a connection to HANA, and there was an INA protocol used there as well.
Yeah, so for example, this INA protocol is used as well once you want to build this search to HANA. And then not web-based protocol, not like HTTP-based protocol is obviously, because this HDI is based on HANA, so that exposes SQL port as well. And this is where, let's say, I live, right? For most of my life, but this is where it took me quite a while to understand, for example, this HDI concept, because in this data-intensive world, I couldn't find kind of like, how does this help me? And only once I started trying your tutorials, on this business application side, I understood why it is important, why it is helpful, why it is really something that accelerates stuff, right? So now let me just move back to our stuff here, right? So something that I showed already on this kind of like previous streaming with Maxi was that we were using SQL. We were using the service keys to HDI to connect to this data, like in this HDI container. But one thing that would really kind of like be helpful to people who are coming from this data world and just would like to play with HANA without really trying to understand what this whole HDI concept is about, which again I found extremely useful for let's say this business enterprise application developers. Is just simply the thing that we kind of like are familiar with, which is schema, right? So again, HDI has the schema, but it has the whole bunch of different stuff around this as well. And then there is this really well hidden thing in SAP Cloud Platform trial that basically, while this service you had to create, from the command line, at least according to the tutorial that I was following, it is this HDI shared, right? While what I want to work with is this schema, right? So instead of this HDI, I just pick schema. And then it will create some kind of like technical name for your schema. And what I woke up with the thought today, I don't know, maybe it is documented. I never found this in documentation. And my wife was shocked, just like, why all of a sudden before I get up from the bed, maybe I'm opening too much intimacy in my life, but I just grabbed laptop, I opened this laptop and just like, I need to try if it works, right? So I just typed something like schema, and I just wanted to call it like this, right? So schema name, next, and now I will call it Good Books Schema Service.
Well, okay. While that's creating, so yeah, Greg Not So says OData is not optimized for massive volumes of data, and that's correct. Yeah, OData was never designed for that sort of thing. I mean, there is I guess a sliding scale of what people think massive volumes is, but on the scale that you're talking about, Witalij, it's definitely not optimized for that.
Yes, and the reason why I mentioned this, DJ, it was not to insult anyone from enterprise application developers, but I've heard this gazillion of times. Just like, I will give you all data access, right? And grab data that you want from there. So we've been looking already in the past, into this web ID, and here I have this bookshop HDI container. Let me just remove it for time being. And because, this HDI container is really built into this SAP Cloud Platform, experience, this is something that you can just really quickly add to your web ID.
Yeah, exactly. And that was what we saw just a minute ago in the cockpit, where it was an HDI shared plan version of an instance of the of HANA, right? In your service marketplace.
Yep. And then, for example, it took me a while to understand what does it mean OpenSQL console and OpenSQL console admin. And if we just look at select current user, current
Ooh,
schema.
that's exciting.
Yes, these were all the pop-ups that we were discussing before the show, right?
Yeah.
From dummy. So, and Tom Young explained this recently in one of these shows as well. This HDI container and two users that you are getting with this. One is RT, which is runtime user, and the other one, now if I open this as an admin, and I go and, oops, sorry, I just wanted to copy this query. Seems like I thought it is selected, but it was not. And execute it once again. Now the admin is DT user, which is design time user, which is the guy who is, building all these objects from CDS on behalf of the application developer, right? Okay. Now, in the meantime, I hope that our schema got created, but now what is in there, right?
Kind of like, what is it? What's in there?
You cannot get to access to this just simply from here. HDI containers are listed, but schemas are not. But if we look at the users table, where username, and if you remember, I call it good books, right?
Yep.
There is the user that has been created, right?
Okay.
So how do I create it? Okay, I could do it, and I could do it from the command line as well. Or maybe I should, but let's call it just, good book user service key. Save. And here we are, right? So now this is my user, good books, as I wanted it to be called, not like user underscore and, some
blah,
long
blah, blah. Yep.
name. And this is the schema that I'm working with, and this is the password if I want to connect to it from outside, right? So now let me just go back to my connections, and now I want to do the, sorry, not the OData, but now HANA connection.
Yep.
Sorry, it shouldn't be HANA XS, which is kind of like connecting to HANA XS Classic, but I want to connect to the database, right? And now it is my, sorry, not HDI, it is good book schema.
Yep.
And the host is the one that we've seen right here. And the port is the one that we do right here. And the user now is simple. Good books.
Database as a service.
Right. It just the password is the one that has been generated and access to which we got just by using this. Okay. Now, because this is cloud, we need to use TLS, not that we want. We can skip validate host certificate for now, but basically, should we want to validate this, there is the certificate that is available right here. Let me create it, right? And now in my enterprise landscape, I have as well view not just into this application data, but as well
into there,
right? It's just that nothing is there right now. So now this is where I need to build this, as I mentioned, data intensive application, or what we call simply data pipeline. Just to save some time, I hope that the thing that I prepared kind of like will save us some time. So let me try to just simply import the one that I created already.
GBTK.
And if someone watched this previous discussion, previous episode with Maxi, then they might remember that I used this Jupyter to connect to some CSV file on the GitHub. I sucked this, and then I persisted this as so-called HANA data frame, which basically created the table behind the scene. The problem with this table, first of all, that I unfortunately deleted it from this previous experiment, so we cannot look at this. But the real problem was that we have very little influence on how this table should look like, right? So the obvious practice would be obviously the data engineer should create this table all the proper way before we are persisting any data in there. But basically what we will try to grab from here is this rating data, and I showed this as well before, that it is about 63 megabytes of data, and therefore it would be as well too much just reading this into the client and then persisting this from the client. So these are good book ratings.
That's right, and you even talked about the username there, which is similar to yours.
Right. It was not like similar to my name, but similar to my father's name, Zygmunt.
Yes, Zygmunt. To your Twitter ID. Sorry, yes.
Right. So now we have this good book schema, this connection that we defined, and I will keep my fingers crossed that this is going to work. And just to make sure, we need to see, we indeed can see that again, according to this specification, let's put that we created, for this data pipeline, there is a container built that deployed all the custom code that I needed to include. Because remember, I mentioned that right now, not matter how many predefined transformations we create, not all of them will cover all our needs, right? So in this case, for example, I needed to reformat some of the data where the guy who was putting the CSV files just thought that if there is no value, then the good idea is to put just dash.
Yeah.
And obviously dash in numbers column would immediately break my my schema on the my table on the other hand. So obviously, I'm just showing this just to get a little bit more of understanding what is happening. But the data engineer, obviously, you don't need to look into all this, OS level logs, right? You have monitoring right from here, and then we can see that the status is complete. So now, again, I keep my fingers crossed that now in our landscape, we have as well good book schema, which is the HANA database. And in there, there are some system tables, but there is as well these good books, right? So the system tables was one thing that obviously, as a data engineer, should I expose this to business data government, I don't want to expose. So let me just go back to these connections and just do small little change blacklisted schemas there. So
Nice.
basically what I'm saying here is just
do the sys in the repo there and stuff like that.
Yes. So blacklist all these system schemas, and now as I go back to my, this is what I want business to see, right? This sys here is okay, because the sys is basically the system schema that contains some synonyms to some table that we might want to see. But basically, here is my good books, right? Schema. In there, I got good books 10,000. Ratings of 10,000 good books. And now, if I look in there, I have fact sheet, and hopefully here, data preview works, right? And basically, what we've got here is that we got some user ID, book ID, and rating that these people put. Now, the next step usually is that we want to really better understand what is in all these different, sources of data that I can use in my enterprise data landscape. Therefore, we started the process that is called data profiling.
Okay.
And while it looks like, we started something from, let's say, business kind of UI. Remember these dashboards that I mentioned, where you just monitor the quality of your data and so on and so forth. Behind the scene, it should create as well the data pipeline, because this data pipeline is basically, grab data from from the table. Right now, it is in status pending, meaning that grab this from one place. Let me just open this.
Yep.
Right. So there is some starter. Now this is a predefined data pipeline, right? And I'm just showing this to explain what's going on, right? And then we have SAP HANA operator, which basically reads data from SAP HANA table that we want to profile, and then it does some analysis, some additional steps, and then write this metadata about this specific table back, right? So it is still in status pending, even though, okay, now we see that it is really running, and now it is analyzing, all the 65 megabytes of this data.
So basically, another Kubernetes managed pod was created for this profiling, right? That's the whole point.
Right. And while it is doing that, I can quickly create as well my connection, where I need, once again, this data from this key. So this will be my user password, and it will be good books on the port number that I should remember by heart. Now 2383, 323.
803.
Yes. 23803.
803.
Thank you. Again, I need to use TLS. I'm doing wrong thing. I'm skipping certificate. Obviously, don't do this in production. That's why I was explaining, we are not doing all the things right here. And now if I look into my catalog, and if I look into my table, there should be one table there, right? GB 10K rating. Okay, in the meantime, the process in data intelligence that profiled this data is completed. So we can, yes, we see it here, right? So this was the error from OData, if you remember.
Yep. Oh, actually, Greg asks a really interesting question. The 23803 port, is this a well-known port, or is it a generated one? I mean, the number suggests to me that it's a generated one, but that would be my guess.
Yes. So behind the scene, the way this SAP HANA in trial works, what we can pretty much kind of like understand from by just looking in there, is that there is just some huge SAP HANA instance that obviously we do not expose the complete instance, but then there is this one of the so-called MDC multi-database containers. Don't mess this container with Kubernetes container, with HDI container.
With Docker containers.
With Docker containers, right? This is HANA.
Everything is a container.
Database container in MDC setup. And then as many of these containers you create, right? If you're playing with HANA Express, you can create these so-called tenant databases, and each of these tenant databases then will get their own unique SQL port on which we are connecting, right? And in this case, this was just the SQL port that has been generated for this specific tenant and that is available. And now if we are looking back, into our data, we run through the profiling, and now we can pretty much as well really quickly analyze that indeed, when it comes to number of records, we have 500,000 records. And there were 24,500 unique users, which did, these ratings. The books, as as we should expect from the name of this data set, were 10,000, right?
Nice.
And the ratings is between 1 and 5, and we can read that these that are rated 4 is the most, and number 5 is the next one. And luckily, just because these were best 10,000 books, obviously we should expect that this one rating or rating 1 star is the lowest one, right?
Yep.
Okay. And this is where, once again, we were kind of like starting building our enterprise data landscape for this specific exercise. So far, we didn't connect the schema, that we create to import data somewhere externally. You don't want to import this data using, CDS, including the CSV file that is 68 megabytes just to prefill your tables. Obviously, you want to use now tools that are meant to do this, right? But this is where now we kind of like we have our landscape, and where we now can start connecting our different systems, and we can analyze, what we have in our in our landscape. Because, for example, if we have this API here that, maybe I should, for clarity, use slightly different colors, right? So here is our API for the bookshelf, and we have some book ID there, and here is our data set with the best rated books, right? So now we can imagine that, for example, we have, machine learning model that we want to build on top of this data that would now provide the recommendation to your bookshop, because right now there are only 5 books from what I've seen in the table. But even out of these 5 books, is if your user is buying one of them, we can use already data coming from this HANA to generate the model that would recommend for your application something here. But we will leave this to some other episode.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that this whole approach allows us to think of these things in sort of decoupled terms, right? So you're not trying to do everything in one massive lump of logic or system. You're actually seeing the data in 2 different ways. I mean, in fact, just when you say talking about next time, we've got a minute left. What is, in your mind, this has been brilliant, what would be the key takeaway, the key learning takeaway for the folks on the stream today? Given that, if you want to come back and do even more, which I think would be brilliant, you're more than welcome. But what's the key takeaway from you for today?
Open your mind. And seriously, I mean, with all seriousness, it is not about, learning one specific thing, deploying CDS to build the table in HDI container. It is not that, just because the old things that you understand is only HANA schema and SQL, you need to master, or you need to, build everything using just these tools, right? What I really kind of like wanted to achieve by joining Maxi show and your show, just let's wear, all these different caps and hats and see things somewhat broader and start understanding, this other developer side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has been brilliant for me. I've been aware of the different plans for the HANA on trial, for HANA trial service, but I thought, well, I don't even understand what those plan names mean, let alone what I would do with them. So now I'm so much the wiser. So thank you for that. Right.
And you cannot imagine how much wiser I am just by going through, these CAP tutorials. Okay, and I just scratched the surface. I'll be honest, I just did what was necessary for me to understand some concepts where I can combine this in one show. Let's put it this way.
Exactly. There's so much there. Witalij, I see you've poured the drink, which signifies a job well done. Thank you, Witalij, for coming on behalf of everyone here on the channel right now, and also on behalf of the folks watching this replay.
And
what is
DJ,
the beer? What is the beer?
Right. So specifically for this show, I prepared. This is the Polish beer called artisan beer called Honolulu. As you know, maybe many people already forgot that Hana is just a small village on one of the Hawaii islands, right? So I thought that bringing something that is related to Hawaii, which in this case is a quadruple hazy IPA called Honolulu, will be a good idea, especially that I was looking for some sticker where I could put Hana instead of Hono, and then it would make it Honolulu, and it would be really nice. Instead, just because you mentioned stickers, really closing word from my side, I have these data intelligence stickers that I received from my marketing. I have like 2 packs like this, and I'm really waiting for the moment when we will be back on the road doing, already face-to-face meetings with our developers, and I will be able to distribute this as well.
Perfect.
Cheers.
Cheers. And until next time, see you all on Friday, usual time, usual place. And thank you again, Witalij. And cheers. Thanks, folks.
Thank you for hosting me.